Hey guys, today we'll be going over the tractor cannon changes that went live with the new August update for Destiny 2. If you want to learn all there is to know about the new tractor cannon, then we should get started. First things first, we'll read the old description of the weapon and then the new description of it. Conveniently, they are both present in the game right now. If you hover over a lot of weapons and armor, it displays the old exotic perk description, and when you inspect the item, it displays the new one. So the old version of the tractor cannon reads, emits impulse push that suppresses enemy abilities and increases elemental damage vulnerability, while the new updated description reads, this weapon emits a powerful impulse that pushes enemies away, suppresses their abilities, and makes them more vulnerable to all incoming damage, especially void. So we gotta test how much more damage we can do when the debuff is applied to enemies for each damage type, and see what we can and can't stack with it. Previously, the tractor cannon only buffed void damage by 50% and could stack with other buffs and debuffs. So luckily I had 3 auto rifles that all have the same impact, making it really easy to test this. The Valkydian, Hollow Earth, and Dark Decider. For proof that they all do the same impact, here's me testing each of them out against the Lost Sector boss. The Valkydian, which is arc damage, crits for 115. The Dark Decider, which is void damage, crits for 115, and the Hollow Earth, which is solar, also crits for 115. So the tractor cannon makes enemies more vulnerable to all incoming damage, but how much? The patch notes say 33%, so let's confirm that. First, I used the tractor cannon on the enemy, and then using Valkydian, I hit for 153 damage, which is in fact a 33% increase to my arc damage. And it looks like it works the exact same for solar. I'm getting 153 damage per shot again. Now for void, I hit 172 damage, which is a 50% increase. So far so good. The gun still buffs void damage by 50% and now buffs all other elements by 33%. Of course, the description said all incoming damage, so we gotta test kinetic weapons too. Using the new Forsaken auto rifle Ether Doctor, I went from 146 damage to 194, which is again a 33% increase. Cool. So now the tractor cannon actually buffs kinetic damage too. And again, it said all incoming damage. So I would assume it works with abilities and supers too. And that is correct. My fusion grenade goes from hitting around 5,000 damage to over 6,600 with the tractor cannon. Math adds up. So now that the tractor cannon has all this versatility for each element, what's the catch? Well, there is some bad news. Previously, you could stack tractor cannon with all other debuffs. For those not familiar, a debuff is something that weakens an enemy so that you can do more damage to him, while a buff is something that strengthens you as a player, allowing you to do more damage. Both a debuff applied to an enemy and a buff applied to you produce the same end result, increased damage, except they just work differently. So the tractor cannon is considered a debuff because it makes the enemy weakened to incoming damage. Before, you could stack tractor cannon and melting point together to do more damage, but now that's not the case. In the footage you see I hit 23,902 with my Whisper of the Worm, while my friend applied melting point, which is a 50% buff or 1.5 times damage multiplier. Then I hit for 21,241 with my Whisper, while the tractor cannon's 33% damage buff or 1.33 times damage multiplier was applied. Before this update, you could combine those two multipliers, 1.33 multiplied by 1.5, to get a higher damage. But as you can see with both the tractor cannon and the melting point applied, I only hit for 21,241, which was exactly the same as when we used the tractor cannon only. This means that the tractor cannon debuff canceled out the melting point. So unlike before the update, you cannot use tractor cannon and another debuff together. This is pretty unfortunate, but it doesn't say anything about not using a buff and a debuff together. Let's see how that works. So one good example of a buff that affects you as a player is the trench barrel perk on the EP shotgun. After meleeing an enemy, your shotgun gains a 50% damage increase that lasts for 4 seconds, as well as some other increased stats. So theoretically, this buff should stack with tractor cannon. Without the perk active, I hit for 2523. Then with trench barrel active, I get 3783, which is in fact a 1.5 times increase as I mentioned. And then I'll use tractor cannon on top of the trench barrel perk. Tractor cannon will be affecting my solar shotgun damage, so it should increase my damage by 1.33 times on top of the 1.5 times buff from trench barrel. If you want to get specific, the tractor cannon buffs damage other than void by 1.3326 times. The higher the damage numbers, the farther you're going to have to go in the decimal place to be accurate. So altogether, I should hit around 5,043 damage, and that is exactly what I get in this clip. So what did we learn about the updated tractor cannon? We now know that solar arc or kinetic damage is increased by 33% when the tractor cannon debuff is applied to enemies. And just like before the the update, void damage is still increased by 50%. So that's all pretty cool, but we also know that you cannot stack things like melting point and tractor cannon together like you could before, which is kind of a shame, but at least we found out you can still stack buffs with the tractor cannon like trench barrel. So some quick thoughts on the change. I'm really not sure how I feel about it. I'm kind of upset about not being able to stack debuffs with it anymore. That was always really fun to do. If you have a Sunbreaker Titan with hammer strike, there's really no reason to use the tractor cannon since the Titan can apply the melting point just with the hammer strike ability, and that'll save you some room in your heavy slot for something else. But at the same time, you can only get that melting point once your ability has recharged. While on the other hand, you have a bunch of shots in the tractor cannon that allows you to keep applying its debuff over and over on multiple enemies, which is pretty useful. I'd say tractor cannon will be most useful in activities like escalation protocol, where you want to weaken a bunch of enemies all at the same time, and you don't want to wait for an ability to come back. But even if you're not using a void subclass, tractor cannon can still be very useful to carry around. I'm definitely mixed on this one, so let me know what you guys think in the comments. As always, thank you very much for watching.